unshakable belief that the government is slowly eroding their basic freedoms.
Tonight we're discussing the anti-lockdown protesters. There are different reports about how many people went on that march in London on Saturday, but there's definitely a massive division between people who think that it was a good thing and people who think it was a terrible thing. And in this show, I have had people pull out because they don't want to come on to share a platform with people who went on the march. It's been one of the most sort of difficult discussions to hold. However, I think we need to hold a discussion about this because it's important that we don't just have our own little camps who jeer at each other. And what will happen when we come out of lockdown? Will we be able to heal from this? To start the show, I've got Heiki, who was on that march, and I'll have to ask you, Heiki, why were you on that march, and do you think that there is a danger of these anti-lockdown protests infecting people? Do you think it's a public health risk? Obviously, we'll hear from other people who disagree with you, but could you let us know your views on this?
From the very beginning back in Wuhan, it was known that the open air is the least likely environment in which you will catch SARS-CoV-2 virus, and thereby also risk becoming sick with COVID-19, which is a disease that can come in about 10% of people who are infected with, 10 to 20% of people infected with SARS-CoV-2. There was actually a series of studies of open air events around the world, whether anti-lockdown protests, BLM protests, and so on. And the peculiar thing was, in the BLM case, it was found that the numbers of infections in areas that were heavily engaged in protests declined in those areas where BLM had been engaging in protests in the United States of America. There were very large protests, very militant protests at the beginning in the United States. So both from the health point of view, the very safest environment is an outside environment, and also from a psychological and political point of view, the defense of our rights, the protection of our freedoms, and therefore also of our communities, which are necessary not only to protect all our rights and defend our rights in general against capitalist onslaughts, but also to protect our communities themselves from disease, whether it be SARS-CoV-2 infection and COVID-19 disease, or other diseases that follow from the policies introduced in the name of protecting healthcare and in the name of saving the NHS. And I emphasize in the name of, because that's what we really got. We've got in the name of lots of things happening, in practice, plunder, theft, robbery, corruption, and the destruction of rights across the world, and also the destruction of the NHS.
Right. So you don't think there's any danger of infection from anti-lockdown protests? I mean, there was no masks, no social distancing. You just don't think that's a possible way of infecting?
There is only one case in over 7,000 cases recorded in China. Because, as you know, they have quite intense surveillance systems in some of the big cities. So they checked up all the cases, how they'd been caught, and they found only one instance where someone, out of over 7,000 cases, where someone had become infected, that's just infected with SARS-CoV-2, the virus, and not necessarily ill. So the idea that people catch it in the open air is completely false. Ventilation is the central question in this epidemic, in these epidemics. Ventilation, if you've got good enough ventilation, you will not catch coronavirus. Let me give an example. Out of 20, it's only a 1 in 27 million chance of catching SARS-CoV-2 or coronavirus on an aeroplane. Only 1 in 27 million cases of flights. And this is sitting right next to people on aeroplanes for long periods of time, because the ventilation extracts the air and replaces it every 3 minutes. And it's known since March last year in the WHO's website themselves that you require 10 minutes within 1 meter in order to catch a virus from someone facing them.
Okay.
Well, in an enclosed environment.
I'd just like to, I'll come back to you, because there's probably, I mean, we'll hear other people's views on this, but
Yeah.
I just wanted to show, we did a survey of 800, more than 800 people applied. This was one of the questions and the results of it. Would you feel safe on an outdoor demonstration with no masks or social distancing? No, 81%. That's 844 people answered that. They're mostly Labour supporters or Labour members or ex-members. It's so it's quite clearly the case that most people don't feel safe without a mask or with social distancing. So I'm just going to bring in Malcolm Fincken, who has replied. Malcolm, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
So have you've heard what Heiko had to say. What's your view on the anti-lockdown protesters? Do you think they're a danger? What danger do you think they pose?
Well, I don't have any sympathy for them at all, really. I think they're extremely dangerous and irresponsible. I think the scientific and medical evidence is absolutely clear that lockdowns have played an important part in reducing the spread of viruses, including coronavirus. And the failure of some countries to have an effective lockdown strategy has increased infections in countries from India to Brazil to the United States. And the slowness to lockdown in this country at each stage of the pandemic has also led to a faster spread of the disease in the UK, which has led to more infections and deaths than we would otherwise have had, which you can compare with other countries which had stricter lockdowns like New Zealand at an earlier stage. I think the people who take part in these protests have failed to understand the dangers of their approach. Nevertheless, we still have to decide whether it is right to ban these protests. And on balance, I would say, no, it's not right. The lockdown protesters already feel that they are being oppressed by an authoritarian government, which is bent on restricting their freedoms. And then they would claim that a ban on demonstrating is further evidence to support that claim. A ban could therefore be counterproductive. As the protests themselves, as you have suggested, can enable the faster spread of the disease, there need to be strict guidelines as to which the protesters should adhere. For example, there should be restrictions on where they can hold the protests to minimise the dangers to public health. They should wear masks and they should be socially distanced. Those who are running media organisations, including social media, also have a serious responsibility here. If there are speeches being made and banners being displayed which contain falsehoods about the virus, the vaccines, or the other measures being undertaken to suppress the virus, these should be pointed out by these media organisations. To sum up, lockdown protests should be permitted, but society has a right to ensure that public health and safety measures are fully enforced and that falsehoods and conspiracy theories which the protesters espouse are not allowed to spread to the wider population.
Well, thank you very much, Malcolm, for coming on and speaking. I will put those points to Heiko, but we're going to bring in another speaker before that. I hope this is the right Felicity. Is this the right? Is this the one? Felicity, are you there? I'll try that one. Felicity, are you there? Hello, Felicity.
Yeah, hi.
Oh, you're on the echo.
Oh,
right.
my God.
That was
Wait.
happened before. What do we do now? I'll come back to you. I'll come back to you. That's. We don't want to have Doctor Who yet. I'm going to move on to Norman Thomas. Norman, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Your sound's good as well. Good to see you, and good to hear your sound's not all over the place.
It's okay. My sound's okay.
What do you think about what Heiko had to say?
Yeah, I mean, I thought what depresses me is the mentality, really, that people go out there that, you know, okay, so they don't believe that the protest will infect them, but to go out and protest about this is the wrong thing to protest about. I mean, some of the protesters think of Boris Johnson as a kind of form of that he's interfering in their lives in a kind of socialist kind of way. Boris Johnson, the least, the person you'd never ever associate with anything to do with socialism, and would never interfere with your life if he possibly could help it, except to get money off you. I mean, it is just crazy. I feel responsible, really, in a way, because obviously the far right play an important part in these protests and have done. And over in America, we saw that Trump supporters were absolutely against lockdown, and were on huge protests against lockdown in America. And you've got a similar kind of mentality amongst people here. Not all of them, I'd say not all of them, but a lot of them are. The terrible danger is that more of the people disillusioned socialists, really, or activists, are joining these sorts of marches because they think that they're rebelling against authority. And they're not really, because the authority is a really incompetent one. It's Boris, who was really slow on getting to grips with the coronavirus and doing all the wrong things all the time. And old Boris wouldn't mind at all if bodies were stacked high and dying of coronavirus, as long as the economy that he thinks that he can make money out of is still functioning. I mean, it's just crackers to go on these sorts of protests when there's very much more important things to get energized and to be active about. And it's what we're going to see after the coronavirus, when we're going to see unemployment at huge levels, vast social problems that are going to arise from that. That's what we need to be talking about, and that's what we need to be protesting about. And unfortunately, of course, because of what's happened with the Labour Party, we've been robbed of one of the vehicles to do that. The Labour Party is absolutely not going to be helping us in this struggle, but the Labour movement must. So we, as the Labour movement, must be, once it's safe to go out to protest, and I'm prepared to leave it to the experts to do that. Once it's safe to do that, let's go out and protest. But when experts, and I don't mind listening to experts if it's only a matter of a few months, let's do it then. We're actually, I'm part, as you may know, of a group called Labour in Exile Network, which is basically people, many of whom have been suspended or expelled, but many are still in the party fighting away. We're having a meeting on Friday at 7 o'clock, which is about the purge, which, you know, lots and lots of people still been suspended and expelled. I love how you bring it in. I love how I always have to bring it in, because that's my hope, really, is that activists will fight for the right thing. My fear is that a lot of them are going to be pulled into this kind of anti-lockdown protest, which is pointless and a waste of time. But it's like, I mean, I was reading Orwell talking about the 1930s in Britain, writing about the 1930s of Britain, and loads of people who were then socialists had become disillusioned with socialism and would turn into fascism. Disillusioned activists to decide to become fascists, and that's the worst. It's the worst thing we can possibly have. And I just, you know, really hope that the anti-lockdown protests don't develop any further, and that we can basically divert people into rebelling into things that are worth rebelling about, and not this kind of madness. Really, it's insane.
All right, thank you. Look, I'm going to go to Louise from Save Our Rights UK to come in here. Louise, would you like to answer what you've just heard?
Yeah, so my name's Louise, and I'm Save Our Rights UK, and we were one of the first groups to form and to go out protesting. I've been a Labour member all my life. To smear us all as far right when I'm about as left as it could get. I worked in politics, I worked for Parliament, I worked for a Labour MP. Like, it's just nonsense to even start that. You know, Piers Corbyn was the next person out on the streets, another Labour member. You know, you can't just smear us as far right. And to do so is to try and discredit what we're saying. What I heard at the beginning on that song was that the BBC is biased. So why do you listen to the BBC and the media and the Tory government about what is going on? Why on earth are we suddenly trusting the government and their facts and figures? I've got another Labour member who is a former UN ambassador and British diplomat who came on and had an interview with me. And he said, you cannot trust a single fact that the government put out. You couldn't trust it in the run-up to the Iraq war, and you can't trust them now because they will cherry pick to suit what narrative they want to pick. So I don't know when we started trusting Boris Johnson. I don't know when we started trusting the Tories. We have got the Civil Contingencies Act 2004, which would give parliamentary scrutiny to any lockdown every 30 days. They chose to bypass that. They brought in a statutory instrument, the public health regulations, and brought that in with no parliamentary scrutiny, and then passed the Coronavirus Act, which is 324 pages long, in one day. How you can say this is democracy, I don't know. To say that we are fighting against lockdown and COVID, no, I'm fighting against democracy. I'm standing up for democracy. And if you're not paying attention to this stuff and the fact that there's been over 400 statutory instruments, Matt Hancock has literally made laws at 11:30 p.m. on a Sunday night, the night before they come in on a Monday morning. Like, why are more people not standing up? If you care about politics, if you care about democracy, you ought to be with us. We're not about, like, as Heiki said, the risk is minimal, absolutely minimal. I have not had a single person ever get sick from coming to a protest. And I have been out on the streets since the 20th of April last year. So we have been out non-stop and nobody has ever gotten sick, and we had hundreds of thousands of people the other day, and guess what, we're not going to be sick this time either, and we are fighting for people who, like, children didn't eat through lockdown. Children went days without eating. Why? You can't say that's not happening. Women are dying and being murdered because they are locked up with their abusers. We can't wait until this is all done, that children are traumatized, children are starving, women are dying. You can't wait. Like, those people are vulnerable. Disabled people are being discriminated against because of mask mandates. Give all of this advice. Advise people stay home. Advise people wear masks. Give us the real science. Make it advisory. Mandating any of this is an absolute infringement upon our democracy and our rights and our freedoms. If I felt like there was a risk, you wouldn't need to mandate that I stayed at home. I would get my 4 children. I'm a single mum and I've got 2 disabled children, and I would stay home. You wouldn't need to mandate it. You wouldn't need to tell me to wear a mask. I would do it if I felt I was at risk. But to mandate it is an infringement, and to do it in the way that they have done it with statutory instruments and legislation that wasn't able to be scrutinised is outrageous. And I don't understand why anybody thinks that we're going to get our rights and our freedoms back. We are not. They're bringing in vaccine passports, COVID status certifications, which mandate and coerce people into accepting medical procedures. And any coercion into accepting a medical procedure is against every single medical ethical law. You can't accept it. And no, public, and the UNESCO Committee on Bioethics said that you cannot force a single person to do something for the better of society, and individuals' rights and freedoms always supersedes. And so if you believe in democracy, you believe in rights and freedoms and speaking out for vulnerable people, which is what Labour is meant to do, then you should be out with us.
Okay, well,
I'm done now. Sorry.
Thank you, Louise. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to try Felicity again, see if we get the Doctor Who effect. I hope we're all right. Felicity, my fingers are not working. Felicity, are you there?
Hi.
That sounds better.
Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Brilliant. I'd just like to say that I was in favour of the march on Saturday, and I think it was dangerously done, and I do think it has a lot of echoes of the United States, but nevertheless I think we need to look at why anti-lockdown demonstrators, why it attracted so many demonstrators. And I think the reasons are, for example, the government's policies regarding lockdown, corruption and law breaking by government members, no effective opposition to voice dissent. I mean, the Labour Party is void. And basically the overall lack of real direction by both main parties. And all this whilst people are struggling both financially and psychologically with little light at the end of the tunnel. So are anti-lockdown protesters a threat? And I think it's the issue of free speech and freedom to demonstrate which underlies the current issue. And as people have said, we only have to look at the upcoming bills designed to prevent freedom of assembly, speech and demonstration. We must be very careful not to fall into the trap of going against the political extreme right over their demonstrations, saying they should be arrested, prosecuted and banned, as we also may lose our rights as a consequence. Once free speech is presented as something to be balanced with and traded for security, once it is presented as a threat, it loses its moral authority. So we left must not mutate into opponents of free speech. As the Free Press Index shows, it's possible to have great freedom when it comes to transparency of information in society and criticising the powerful, and at the same time consider verbal attacks towards vulnerable people as something that should be restricted. In Finland, for example, there's a distinction between using freedom of speech for criticising the powerful, expressing your opinions and spreading your ideas, and on the other hand, attacking a vulnerable group of people in order to harm that group. So when words are seen as actions, there's a need to define the limits of harm that people are allowed to do to each other verbally. In other words, the cons of unlimited freedom of speech and manifestations of hate speech, racism, misogyny, and so on. Though a great threat is that once people have their speech controlled and it is considered acceptable, the creep into authoritarianism and totalitarianism begins. Some people today are actually calling for more authoritarianism when it comes to freedom of speech, not realizing the end result historically has been the imprisoning and even killing of people for having wrong ideas or speaking wrong thoughts. So freedom of speech and assembly should be universal, except when people promote hate or violence against people. To censure one is to censure all. If rights of free speech are muted for one group, they are muted for all. Finally, in order to preserve the rights of free speech and assembly, let me say, I may disagree with all you say, but I will fight for your right to say it. Thank you.
Thank you, Felicity. It was worth waiting for.
Oh, good.
And I've got to share this next poll result here, which is again 843 people. Does the issue of free speech override concerns about public safety? Yes, and it's 22%, and no, it's 51%. So people are actually thinking that free speech is not as important as a principle as public safety. So that, again, you can see there's lots of people who are opposed to the anti-lockdown protesters. And I'd like to bring in Terry Deans, who was also on the march and he's a regular on this show, so he's obviously a lefty. Terry, are you there?
Hi, Crispin. Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah. And you're also in the same group as Norman, actually, who was saying that we shouldn't be doing all this stuff. So what would you say to Norman?
Well, I don't want to say too much to Norman because I've only got 3 minutes to speak. But this is the first time Norman and I have communicated each other's feelings about this, so that's interesting. And it's a good start, and that's actually what segues me into what I wanted to say at the beginning, actually, because Crispin, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for giving us the platform and the space to have this conversation, because there's too many myths, there's too many people thinking that they know what other people think and they know why other people are doing things, and they make guesses and they assume. And I think that one of the problems with this is communication. Louise mentioned about trusting Tories. I kind of echo how she put that so politely as a testament to her composure. is how these people suddenly, I mean, I'm coming from a position of distrust here with this whole thing from the educational point of view. So that's just a bit of a background information for me as an individual. I can't see how an organization or regime that has a history of deceit, propaganda, subjugation, genocidal imperialism, for example, which the Tory government, lots of the governments in this country have for generations and centuries, how we suddenly trust what they say and what their institutions are telling us to believe in. And I think what Norman said, and one or two other people, Malcolm included, and I think it's great hearing all these conversations. I want to hear what people have to say and hear the different stories, because I like to understand why they think those things, not just run them out of town because they think those things. I want to have that conversation with people. So that's my raison d'etre since I was born and raised in Northern Ireland during a very troubled time over there where people got killed. Funny, Norman mentioned something about we could have more important things to campaign about. Well, can I just take people back to over 12 months ago when Boris Johnson sat in front of the TV screens and described the coronavirus as the greatest threat to our nation in my lifetime. Now, that's some statement, and I think that if someone makes a statement like that, then I can't think of too many other things that are more important to discuss. And that includes the subsequent knock-on effect of those things, whether it's people dying from the virus, with the virus, because of it, or the knock-on effects of the close down, the lockdown, the mental health, the job losses, the domestic abuse, etc., etc. But the thing I wanted to get onto mainly was the education side of things, about why people should understand how each other thinks about things. I could not believe from the beginning that if we had such a problem with a major deadly pandemic, and I'm an ex-war veteran in the Falklands War, so I understand what danger is. I know what it's like to feel like you might die at any moment in time. And it's not funny, okay? So I sympathize with people who are fearful of this, and I also send out my condolences to people who have lost loved ones at this. I didn't meet anybody in that protest on Saturday who were cold-hearted about any of that, because they're not, okay? They're human beings who care for people's lives. But the thing that I have a problem with is the education side of it and the propaganda side. If this was such a big threat, why didn't the government do what they do during military operations for people like me? We're in warfare theatres, which is to give everybody a voice and everybody a chance to speak and to be heard, to reassure, to stop division, to stop acrimony, to stop people being conspiracy theorists, and to stop people being labelled anti-vaxxers and COVIDiots and all this negative stuff which divides people whenever we should be fighting a common cause. And because we're not seemingly fighting a common cause and we're divided, it makes me very dubious about the veracity of the whole thing. So for me, I'm coming from a position of trust, i.e. I don't trust the government, what they've been saying, and the behaviours. I've got a big list of things. I haven't got time to go through them all. The Cummings thing, going to Durham, the track and trace thing, the PCR testing, what constitutes a case, all this sort of stuff. So I don't see why they didn't have panels of experts from the start, across the board, from different people who believe the COVID is what they're saying it is, to other ones equally, renowned world experts who are saying it isn't. Get those people together in a panel, not single talking heads, very eloquent, people who are very convincing and make you think one day you believe it's a fake, and then the next day somebody else speaks and you think, oh, must be real. Get them together, get them to ask each other the right questions, so that the people like us, the non-medical professionals like me, right, can watch these panels of people asking the right people the right questions under the right scrutiny, so we can all watch that and calm everybody down, and it lessens the chances of confusion, division, acrimony, and abuse, and calling people granny killers and telling them that they don't care about people's lives and stuff like that. That's the reason why I was on that march on Saturday.
Thank you, Terry. It sounds, and I appreciate you thanking me for bringing this on, because I do think it's important that we discuss everything. I mean, there should be no subjects that we can't discuss. It's not helpful to keep the lid on everything, and like you say, people second guessing what other people's opinions are. If we all know what each other think, then we can kind of get a better picture of it. Yeah. I'm going to bring in Dave, you've put your hand up, Dave, and I don't know what you're going to say. So this is. I hope you're courteous and nice, Dave.
Right, hi, thank you. Yeah, so a bit about my history. I'm a long-standing trade union activist, PCS union, a veteran protester. So it's of great interest to me what's going on, and the balanced two-sided debate. Thank you, Crispin. There's not enough balanced debate these days. Thanks for that. Set the band up in 2011. We've done 117 protests since then. So this is a subject very dear to my heart. But we've kept off the road and off the streets and off all the protests for over a year now, because our union, like many, say we should respect the COVID restrictions and not risk infecting people. But like Louise says, we are going to be, free speech also matters, and about where all this is being going on about. And we are going to take to the streets this Saturday on a Kill the Bill demonstration in Manchester, because as a long life trade unionist and a socialist and so on, if we just wait until lockdown is over, and the government has the power to keep on extending it. So if we don't fight the Kill the Bill now, Boris has got a massive majority and a loyal majority that he can wield any time he likes. He can bring votes forward if he wishes to do and get stuff through. So I'm in a dilemma here. I have sympathy with respecting COVID lockdown and all that sort of stuff. But on the other hand, as a trade unionist and so on, I'm concerned about the new powers that are going to be given to the police that I think are against all our rights. And if I wait until Boris says lockdown is lifted, we may find the actors already in, and the next protest to go on and get arrested in breach of the law. So I feel that, safety on the one hand, but freedom of speech. After a year off the streets, we're going to be back on the streets again against Kill the Bill. So I have sympathy. The last thing I would say as well is that any protest, whether from the left or the right, if they're growing in numbers, and the anti-lockdown protests are growing in numbers, it is significant. And I always listen carefully to people. If they're on the streets in increasing numbers, something's going on there. People are not trusting the government. They're angry at what's going on, and they've had enough. And whether we condemn them or not, I think it's happening, and I'm watching and listening to what those people have to say and why they're doing it. As I say, we're going to be on the streets ourselves on Kill the Bill, because I greatly value freedom of speech, and that is and has been a life or death issue. Thanks.
Oh, thank you, Dave. Excellent contribution. And now, Mike, I'll come to you in a minute, but Micheline did say she might talk, but she wasn't sure, and she's put her hand up. So I'd like to hear. Micheline, are you there? What have I done?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I need notes, I'm afraid. I find this whole situation really surprisingly infuriating and upsetting, not just about the open air marches, but the whole fact that so many people I know hold these views. And just a few things. I'm speaking as someone who is clinically vulnerable, extremely vulnerable, and I had to self-isolate for nearly a year in order to keep safe. I've had a lot of difficulties with the people who are my personal carers over these issues. I've now been vaccinated, and I'm delighted I've been vaccinated, and I feel I've got a bit of freedom. But I want to say these are the points I wanted to say. First of all, from my position, I can't see there has been a lockdown, not a total lockdown. There's been a middle class lockdown, but most people, working class people, have carried on going to work. You know, you switch the switch and your lights come on, the Zoom's working, taps, water's coming out your taps, bins are getting emptied. Who do you think's doing that? They've always been doing it. So it's like there's this huge invisible workforce that never stopped working. And unlike any sane country, when we asked those people to self-isolate because they'd had a positive test, we didn't offer to pay them while they stopped working, and so they couldn't, because otherwise they couldn't feed their kids or pay their rent. So they carried on going to work. And a lot of those people are the people who got sick and died. And there's really amazingly, they noticed a lot of those people and from Black and ethnic minority communities, but they didn't really notice that that's because they're part of this huge invisible workforce that nobody notices, takes completely for granted. The other thing, the furlough scheme was for their employers, not for the people working in those jobs. It was the people who own the businesses, as far as I can see. Another issue is a lot of those people are carers, and they work within all the care homes, and they work for people like me who live in the community, and they work in children's services, and they were the teachers that went and carried on working to look after the children of the key workers and so on. And because they were not supported, and a lot of them got ill, a lot of the people they cared for got ill and died, which is why so many disabled people died, particularly people with learning difficulties, many of whom they're young people, but they're living in care homes or care in the community and being looked after by incredibly underpaid and undervalued staff who were not given any of the support they needed, the PPE, the financial backing to rest or to self-isolate. So when you put all those things together, when I hear people marching for their notion of freedom, I just think, whose freedom are you talking about? It's not mine, because my freedom comes through all of you lot keeping me safe and giving me the space to come out of my home and protest about things I feel are important. And I can only do that if you all take up the offer of trying to keep the virus as low as possible and protect me from it. Not by meaning I've got to stay at home for the rest of my fucking life, because I'm not going to. And the other thing, because I, for some reason, seem to have a lot of people in my life who would be on that march or have been on that march, or are certainly questioning, have a great mistrust of authority, which I share with them, to be honest. I do understand that. But when I try and talk to people about where they've got their ideas, where they're being educated, so much of it is coming from the US and the conspiracy theories and the whole capitalist machine of individualism and personal freedom, and is very anti-socialist. And I think that needs exposing. I don't think people should ever be stopped from protesting or speaking. That would be madness. But I think it needs exposing. And I don't think the whole picture by any means is yet out in the open. So that, I mean, I'm just looking at the screen in front of me, every face looks white to me, so it's like when I joined the Labour Party, thinking that I was going to be amongst people like me, and I discovered I don't think I ever went to a meeting where people had less than a degree and many people had masters and PhDs, and they all call themselves working class, originating from the working class. But they had no idea, it seemed to me, that they were speaking on behalf of people who were not there, who were not present. who were not included and could never be because they were at work or they were looking after someone or they were totally intimidated by the level of conversation that was going on and the kind of almost arrogance of people thinking that they, you know, that they had a right.
Right. So I've got to move.
I've
got to move on, but I get the picture that you're sort of saying that this is a kind of middle class protest and not really reflective of the whole country and what people are going through. And there's a lot of ableism going on in this as well, and they're not really considering other people than their own circle of social circle. I'm not. That's not all he said, but I'm just thinking that's the kind of nitty gritty of it. Thank you for coming on. I just want to get more people in. I could speak to you for more, but I just wanted to get more people in. Thank you, Micheline. Joanne, you asked to come in earlier, so are you there, Joanne?
Yeah, hi. Hi, Crispin. Thanks for that. Just like Dave Vincent, I'm a trade unionist as well, and you know, obviously, we've got a huge fight on our hands with the right to protest and all these police bill coming in and everything. But where this is concerned, I think we've got a slight difference here. Is you know, when we organise a demo at the moment, we do try and keep people separate. We do try and use masks and things because although we can't trust the Tories, we can't even trust Labour anymore, let alone Tories. That you know we can't. We don't know the real reasons behind this, and none of us can ever. You know, there's been so many different theories put through as to why it's so bad or why it isn't so bad, and that how we got the human right to not bother wearing a mask, etc., etc. But we end up. See, I'm a London bus driver for a start, right? We've lost 56 bus drivers to this COVID. I've lost 3 personal friends to this COVID. Now, when all these protests are turned around and say it's just like the flu, well, I've never personally lost a friend to flu, but I certainly have to COVID. So it exists. We know it exists as a disease, as a nasty disease, and we know that exists. So how can we just turn around and say, it doesn't matter? You know, the figures say here, one thing I say to Heiko, I mean, you know, all the figures he spouted out there, but how do you know how these people got there? Did they all cram themselves on a tube? When they went home, did they all cram themselves on tubes and buses and things? Somebody said that thousands came on the demo, but none got ill. How do you know that? Are you tracking thousands of people to see if they didn't get ill? Nobody knows, and nobody knows an answer to this. The only thing I think we should be doing is playing it as safe as we possibly can for ourselves and for everybody else around us. You know, in China, they've been wearing masks for years because they don't want to spread things when they've got there. And that's a nice thing to do. Whilst we're in this pandemic, we should be thinking about each other and not risking spreading this disease all over the place. As I say, 51 dead in the buses, or 56 dead in the buses now. It's just too many people that are dying from this to totally ignore and do what we want for our own selfishness. I know the lockdown. I mean, I've been on furlough for a long time as well, and it drives us all nuts. But we've got to, you know, we've got to play it as safe as we can until we do find out what's really going on. We know the government's doing all this for money. It's all about money with the government. They want the economy to work. They don't care how many dead bodies. Look at what he said today, Boris, or yesterday about bodies piling up. Yeah. He doesn't care. You know, it's just absolute rubbish, all of it. So all we know is we don't know. And so we should be try to be as safe as we possibly can for each other. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Joanne. I'm going to. There are people who've got their hands up. I'll come back to you in a bit, but I just wanted to speak to Andrea. Hold on a sec. There's too many people here for me to. People keep moving around. Right, Andrea, are you there?
Yes, I am here. How are you, Crispin?
I'm good. Now you were at a demo or on Saturday, and you came across this march. What's your take on the anti-lockdown protesters and what you've heard just when you've come on?
Well, yeah. I was at a demo that I organised for Support Not Deport, which is basically a campaign to protest against Priti Patel's new laws that came out on the 1st of December in regards to deporting non-EU rough sleepers. So I was basically talking through my protest and ended up having the police disrupt my protest as well. I did kind of leak out that they were fining rough sleepers, and yeah, they didn't like that bit. So I had 3 officers charge at me and try and disrupt my protest. So we were then moved, because we didn't have a permit, we were then moved to the front of Parliament Square, and I managed to finish the protest, and out of nowhere, like thousands of people started marching past. Like they literally had no masks on. You know, it was pretty much, from what we saw, it was a lot of white men. And there was this guy with a megaphone, and he was literally like just screaming out slogans about not listening to the government, they're lying to us. And yeah, it just went on for hours, but there were thousands. I would estimate there was between 100 and 200,000 people easily. After our protest, we went to St. James's Park, and yeah, they were down there. They were marching through there as well. So they pretty much marching through Parliament Square and pretty much all of that area up to St. James's Park, and then they were looping back and going again, because we saw them going around a good few times. They went on for hours as well. Yeah, they went on from, yeah, they were still going on even when I left. So yeah, it was pretty out there, to be honest. There was a lot of them, and God knows what's going to happen in terms of this virus and whether the rate will go up. But I guess I'm at the stage now where I do blame the government for this, and obviously the media as well, you know, not holding them to account. And you've got to understand that people are sitting at home by themselves as well, and they're vulnerable in it. So they're going to cling on to anything that they see. And it's, you know, look what we have for media, for God's sake. Do you know what I mean? Like, this was always going to happen, but the numbers that I saw was scary, man. Like, do you know what I mean? I haven't seen any other march like that, to be honest. And
so
yeah.
Do you think the numbers are getting bigger and that there's more people joining these anti-lockdown things?
Like, this was everlasting. Like, and the people that I was with, they were even commenting on the amount of people. Like, I've been to so many protests. Do you know what I mean? From the Kill the Bills to homeless ones, to housing actions, you know, and climate ones, and nowhere near them numbers. Do you know what I mean? Like, this was ridiculous. It was literally everlasting, went on for hours. Yeah, it was non-stop, to be honest.
Right. All right. Well, look, I'm going to thank you, Andrea. Good to see you again.
No.
I'll take the hat off later, by the way. All right. And I'm going to bring in, I think he's here. Yeah, Piers Corbyn, who's obviously been one of the main organisers, actually, of some. I think you've organised some of these. Piers, are you there?
I am indeed, and it's fantastic to be here, guys and girls,
Piers,
everybody. Yes, sir.
How many times have you been arrested?
Been arrested 11 times for refusing Boris Johnson's for refusing to follow Boris Johnson's COVID rules.
And what have you heard? What people have said about the need to protect the vulnerable? I mean, do you agree with that?
Well, I always agree with protecting the vulnerable, but I think there's really 2 important things to understand. This thing is not a pandemic. That meaning there's not extra people dying in the world as there would be if there was a pandemic. what we have is the relabeling of lots of people with flu-like symptoms, some of whom do die, especially if they've got other illnesses. They've been relabeled as COVID. And there's a lot of people dying from being ignored by the NHS. The number of suicides has gone up absolutely astronomically, and deaths from cancer because they're not being looked after. And what I'm saying as the candidate for Mayor of London is that we have to end all these lockdowns and spend more effort and money on defending all people from all serious illnesses, and we shouldn't just be looking after people who've got flu. We have to look after anybody who's got flu, anything. But what about the cancer patients, and so forth? And people around the country are waking up to the reality that this is not a pandemic. The consequences of the government rules are destroying businesses, jobs, and everything. And we have to have a uniting approach to bring together people who, there are people who are getting ill, but what I'm saying about supporting all people with serious illnesses must be important. And that demonstration, I was there, it was huge, absolutely huge. And it might have been more than 500,000 or 200,000, whatever, but it was huge, huge, huge. And I would say it was a total cross-section of the United Kingdom. So, the average of UK, old, young, black, white, mixed race, everybody was there, and people are standing up. And I urge all those listening, please, to, remember, the BBC doesn't spend much time speaking the truth. If you're getting your information from the BBC, perhaps you need to look a bit further. And we've got scientists who point out that what's claimed is not true. Doctors saying it's not true, and you can get independent information. Go to letlondonlive.org or stopnewnormal.net.
Okay, right, we have it.
Organisations go there and stand up for rights, jobs, and freedom. The freedom to organise.
I admire your bringing in a little bit of links in there. We've had it before, but thank you very much for coming on.
Well, thank you for listening.
Cheers.
Right.
Thank you. Now we have just for Piers, for your information. This is the survey we put out. This is one of the questions. The answer to the survey was: should the organisers of anti-lockdown protesters face imprisonment? That should say protests, obviously. Stupid me. It says yes. So 20% of people think that maybe you should be imprisoned. Piers, I'm sorry to say that, but you're muted at the moment. You're muted, so we won't hear your response to that. But that's pretty bad, isn't it? 20%. You could be eating porridge soon. Right. Anyway, Robert Binney, are you there, Robert?
Hi.
Do you have anything to add to what's been said?
Can you see me?
I can only see your name.
Ah, okay. Well, look, since Piers has been on, I didn't realise that. I was just going to relay a conversation I had with him at the famous pub, The Raven, here in Bath, just last week, on the basis that Piers is so easily demonized by the media, and equally the most arrestable surname at any demonstration. So I'm not really, Piers is best to defend himself. I disagree with much of what he is saying about this, but the one thing that I wanted to say at the end of it is I respect his right to express his views and for these people to demonstrate. So I'll leave it there.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Thank you for coming on. There were quite a few people who didn't want to appear and speak at all on this show because Piers was on it, which I find interesting. Charlie Hall, would you like to speak? Are you there, Charlie?
Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted to what Micheline said. So obviously, people who are vulnerable can't help it; they don't choose to be vulnerable. We have a duty to protect those people. The reason that we have to have lockdowns is because of government mismanagement. It's been necessary. We've had I don't know what it is now, like over 150,000 deaths, and that's with lockdowns. And the NHS has been totally overwhelmed as well. I just don't understand how people can be against that. It's incredibly, incredibly short-sighted. If we didn't have that, the more it would spread in the population, the more mutations there would be. People are saying, oh, it doesn't affect me. But if we had a mutation, meaning it was more deadly, then it would start to affect other people. I think as well, I've lost my place. We forget that people have got long COVID as well. It's not just about older people are dying, young people have got it as well. If we didn't have lockdowns at all, the people who are vulnerable would lose their jobs. There'd be more jobs lost in the long run. If people can't go to work, if they can't isolate if they need to. People who have vulnerable people in their families can't get 2 weeks off work to have to self-isolate before they go and see them. At the moment, it's not a right to give other people a disease that could potentially kill them. The protest bill is about rights, but being anti-lockdown is not. I think disagreeing with this is really selfish and it's not socialist. It's our duty to protect people that are more vulnerable than us. I think it seems to me like these are sort of people have got these creeping libertarian attitudes which they claim as socialism, and I don't think that's right, and I think that's really worrying. I don't think protecting people is authoritarian. I think it's just necessary.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for contributing, and I'm going to Mike, who's had his hand up for ages and ages. Oh God, I've just lost him. Where is he? Mike, are you there?
Okay. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Oh, great. Thank you. Hi. Yeah, I mean, a few things, really. I think the first thing to say is that I think this is yet another one of those issues which has sort of brought forward a lot of sort of very obvious divides. And I've been, quite horrified, really, at the number of people, for example, who have just absolutely sort of closed down and refused to even speak to me because I don't happen to agree with them on this topic. And I think that's something really quite dangerous. And eventually I just got to the stage of saying, look, this is what I think. You're entitled to your view. This is mine. If you don't like it, well, that's something you'll have to live with. I'm not going to change it to please you. And it's been quite interesting, really, how, I've had people who I've known in real life actually for quite a long time, cutting me off their Facebook list, for example. Well, their choice. I think it's sad, really, that if we get to that stage. I'm really concerned that so many on the left appear to be giving basic civil liberties such a low priority, as if that really doesn't matter. And as if the only thing that matters is saving lives. Sure, that's important, but so is mental health. So is social well-being. So are all sorts of other issues as well. The average age of mortality from this virus is still 81. It has a mortality rate of less than 1%. We do need to get real. We need to accept the fact that risk is with us. We have become so risk averse. And the way that the government have used psychological techniques to encourage that, I think has been incredibly disturbing. And I think even more disturbing is that whatever your view, it's really important that different points of view are expressed, say, within Parliament. Not one single MP of any party voted against the original COVID legislation, not one. And yet there have always been between 15 and 20% of the population who have clearly had a different view. We have not been represented. And when we don't get represented in the mainstream, as it were, that's where the extremists, the fringe, tend to then jump in and try and recruit. I hope that doesn't happen, but I cannot vote Labour on Thursday. Not only because we're led by the most appalling, useless leader in living memory, but also because I'm not prepared to vote for an authoritarian party that backed the lockdown. I don't back it. I don't agree with it. I never will. Simple as.
Well, thank you for coming on and speaking. And yeah, I get what you're saying about people not talking to you on Twitter. Look, I just want on Facebook and unfriending you and stuff. It is a very divisive issue, and I can't believe the response I've had to just putting this show on at all. Don, are you there?
Hi, Crispin. Hope all is well.
Now, Don, you're normally a comedian, but you've taken your comedian hat off because you were on the march on Saturday. Do you want to tell people what brought you onto the march?
First of all, thanks for letting me speak, and it's great to see Terry Deans there. The reason why I went is because it feels like alternative voices are being censored by the mainstream media and big tech platforms like Google. And I'm not talking about crazy conspiracy theorists. I'm talking about actual learned scholars like Dr. Sunitra Gupta, who's an epidemiologist at the University of Oxford, who's been maligned by the Guardian newspaper. She's left-wing, and she's got a lot of beef for daring to suggest an alternative to lockdowns, like targeting care homes. Now, in terms of the vulnerable people, I think the government should have paid for them, especially families who are poor and lived in cramped conditions, to pay for them to self-isolate in hotels in different houses. And remember, Dr. Sunitra Gupta was worried about lockdowns because it impacts on the most vulnerable and the poorest in society. I went on a protest because I'm against vaccine passports, and I'm worried we might end up in a future where people can only claim the universal basic income or the benefits if they show their medical records, and that could be used by scrupulous third parties. Now, no one's denying this is absolutely horrific, this pandemic, but the 150,000 people died absolutely horrific. But remember, they died while testing positive for COVID-19 in the last 28 days. So it wasn't directly COVID. They died of COVID, most of them. It's based on a test, a PCR test, which produces a lot of false positives. A PCR test, which it invented itself, even though I don't agree with anything else he says, Kerry Muller said, is not fit for purpose. And the problem is we need to check into other things like ventilators. Were there other respiratory infections involved as well? How many people had comorbidities and stuff like that? And when I spoke to you earlier this week, I want to talk about India as well. Whenever I see a report on the BBC News or Sky News, this is the same television channel that has maligned Jeremy Corbyn day in, day out for the last 4 or 5 years. Why would I trust them? Now, it's absolutely horrific what's happened in India with COVID-19, but is that the only story? India is a country, according to the Times of India, where 27,000 people die on a daily basis, mainly because of TB and stuff like that. So people are dying of COVID, but was there other factors like President Modi's fascist policy towards agriculture and to the poorest in society, other comorbidities, the substandard healthcare system? So all I'm saying is take a look at the whole picture and do your research and look at all different types of experts, not conspiracy theorists, but all different types of scientists. Thank you, Crispin.
Well, I have to say that was one of the things that was coming out on social media when the march was going on Saturday. People saying, can't these people see what's happening in India, was a response to that. Did you want to say something else? Sorry. Yeah. So you're a typical comedian. You want to come on for an encore?
I know. Also, I went to the protest and it wasn't all white men. It was one of the most diverse things I've seen. In fact, obviously there's going to be far right fringes and I disagree with them and I will denounce them. But mainly it was hippie types of people. And there are a lot of black, Asian, women, people from a very diverse background who just happen to agree on one issue.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Now, we've come to people putting their hand up now. I asked people if they wanted to speak before and they all said I'm not speaking on there, but now people are interested in speaking. I love it. We've produced a discussion at last on this. Ruth, You did write and say that you might speak, so I'm not saying you're one of the people who wouldn't speak, but what would you like to say?
Well, thank you very much. I agree with Don Biswas, and with Piers Corbyn. Although, I mean, the first time I met Piers was in Camden with demolition detonators. He won't remember me, but it was, I think, 50 years ago. And I like Piers's form of politics, although I don't agree with this particular demonstration. I agree with people being able to demonstrate in the way that you have, but I think that the amount of deaths that we've had in this pandemic in Britain means that we do have to lock down. The trouble is we've got this government who are nincompoops and liars. And if we're going to have to put up with their shenanigans, we have to have these continual lockdowns because they've made a mess of it. And if they're going to make a mess of it, we have to be careful. But at the same time, we need the right to demonstrate, and we need people who are going to dissent from the norm, from the, you know, from the edicts that have been handed down from our government. We need dissenters. There hasn't been enough dissension. And, you know, I just think that the kill the bill is important, and we have to bring out a mass demonstration for that. But as far as the lockdown is concerned, I'm afraid we do have to. I'm 77, like a lot of other people on here, and I have to be careful, as well as the fact that I'm on the front line working with refugees. So I have to wear a visor every time I see them. And they're not only mentally ill through being asylum seekers and having to deal with this fucking government, excuse my language, but, you know, they've also got COVID to deal with. You know, they've got temporary accommodation. Some of them have been sleeping on the street, and we managed to find them temporary accommodation in hostels, and then they're told at the end of the week, you've got to go on the street again. I mean, that would drive you to madness without having all the other PTSD and whatnot. So, you know, there are certain people in the community who are much more vulnerable than everybody else, and we do have to be careful with them. So, unfortunately, with this kind of government, we can't afford to take chances with our health. But at the same time, we need free speech and we need human rights. And all the people that are talking about human rights on this program today, I'm with them. You know, we've got to stick up for our rights in spite of the pandemic. And we have to help the other nations like India and so on.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming on. And I'm going to bring in Kendrick, who asked to speak, but he's not got cameras. But anyway, we can watch his name. Kendrick, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think there is some disparity in the lockdown rules in the sense that we don't see employers who are forcing people into work being fined the same way, say, people who have house parties are. So, I mean, that's something that perhaps needs to be addressed. But when we talk about right and freedom, it works both ways, and I have a right to protect myself and protect other people. And if I'm having to go to work or have to go to the doctors, I should be safe, and people should respect my right to safety in that situation. And if we look at history, there's always been rules that we have to acquiesce to in terms of public safety, whether that's a no smoking ban or speed limits. And my final point is that, as mentioned by a few people earlier, today is Workers' Memorial Day, and we've seen a large number of working people die due to COVID. It was mentioned before, bus drivers. There's also people working in schools, people working in the medical profession. And I think, you know, any rules which protects those people and makes their work safer should be adhered to.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for coming on. I'm going to bring in Rob Dennison. Are you there? Oh my God. Hold on a sec. Rob, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Right. There's a few different things. I don't know how this is going to come across. The point, as it Don made about all these having this idea that that the state should pay to protect vulnerable people, is a one, sounds wonderful, but the kind of libertarian sentiment, they're not going to do that. But basically, the thinking behind this Sinatra Gupta and all of this is basically let COVID rip and protect the vulnerable. How are you going to do that? How are you going to pay for it in a private market economy? It just isn't feasible. I think what's happened in India and Brazil should be a warning, really, to some of these people who are eager to open up. Basically, we hit lucky with the vaccines. That's got absolutely nothing to do with this dreadful government. The reason that, we just had fantastic scientists, heroic researchers and developers, and the government basically hit lucky with this vaccines. If the vaccines hadn't worked, we would be in the same position as India and Brazil. Let's not sort of have any illusions about that. I think the idea of lockdown, to me, it is a sign of failure in a way, because when you look at the countries that have handled the pandemic well, Taiwan is a good example. They had proper test, track and trace, and they closed the borders. What the fuck's the matter with it? Sorry, the matter with this government, they can't close the borders. They can harass Syrian refugees and they can close the borders for them, but they can't close the borders to keep us safe. Basically, that if that had been done, then lockdown wouldn't have been necessary. But sadly, we are where we are. So, without the lockdown, we would be in a much, much worse position. I am uneasy about the sort of libertarian aspects of the right to protest, and I do think it should be upheld. But I think the protesters, there has to be the discipline of distancing and wearing masks, and having the sentiment of basically looking after and protecting other people like Michelle and other people, who need to be, who should be protected. That's what we should feel. Be as socialists, we should care about other people. I think I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Well, thank you, and I like the swearing added to the flavour. Mark keeps saying he's got his hand up, and I don't know. I didn't see it in the digital form, but maybe he's got his hand up another way. I can't see everyone.
Hey,
Mark,
hey, can you hear me?
I can. Yeah, in the dark a bit, but yeah.
I'm in the dark a bit, yeah, because I haven't got the lights on.
Okay.
I really don't think we are appreciating how much people have suffered, throughout these lockdowns. I mean, I've been looking after my two elderly parents throughout since last year, and the first lockdown was a proper lockdown because I was driving in London. I'm based in London, between South London and going to Westminster, and there was no cars on the roads, there was nobody around, it was complete silence. It was like a proper lockdown, right? Every other lockdown since, there's been people everywhere mixing, going about their business, working, etc. But I don't think we appreciate how much this has affected people's mental health, their well-being, the waiting list in the NHS. I mean, my parents have been frightened to death. My dad's back in hospital now at the moment, in the ITU, having had another operation. But look, guys, there's people with money, and that money isn't being shared around, all right? Let's be honest. I mean, if we don't know that, then I don't know what to say. You know, there are people, like somebody said, not eating, food banks having to be used, single mothers suffering. You know, that there's lots of things happening that we need to address. And the march on Saturday, I was at the march on Saturday, and it wasn't about conspiracy theorizing or even COVID-19 in particular. It's more about our civil rights, our liberties, you know. And what concerns me is we were asked to give up lots of these rights, yeah, for the health of the country. And there's been so many rules and laws brought in that what concerns me is the government has begun to think that they're their rights and they're their civil liberties to sort of dictate to us what we can and can't do. I mean, there is a hell of a lot of laws that have been gone through, you know, already. I mean, the amount, dare I say it almost verges on a police state. You know, we've got so much CCTV, facial recognition. The powers the police have already are phenomenal to stop people. And I'm most concerned for the vulnerable and the needy and the poor, you know, and poverty as defined in the UK. You know, Luton, for instance, 50%, you know, child poverty. These are the things that have worsened due to lockdowns. I don't think we protected the vulnerable elderly in the right way. Look at the care homes. Yeah. You know, there's so much more that we could be doing.
Yeah. Okay. Look, so I just want to. I'm aware of the time, and I just want to thank you for coming in. And I wasn't snubbing you because I couldn't see your digital hand. You might have put your hand up, but it is dark as well in your room.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Hand up in that dark room, but I could try and. Anyway, I'll shut up. I'm going to move on to Michelle in Hull, and Michelle, you've got your hand up.
Yes, hiya. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Just make a quick point. I did work in a PCR testing lab for about a couple of months. The company lost the contract anyway, but I did learn a lot in that time. It was new to everyone. It was a team of analysts, and I did learn that the actual result, the machine can give you a positive result, but you have to actually, the methodology, it has to be input in the machine properly, and you have to analyse each gene. It actually looks for like you need 2 good profiles of 2 of 3 genes to test positive. When the gene is there, the machine itself could just give you a result as positive. But when you go in and analyse them, you can overrule what's there by proper analysis of the results, because if a gene curve isn't exactly perfect, it's got a form it should take, and if it's not perfect, that will be it's not there. It's just a fault. That's a false result. So with proper training and analysis, yes, I'm pretty sure you can get a good accuracy of PCR. That was the only point I wanted to make. I love you, Dawn, but I'm sorry that I had to say that. So there you go. Thank you, Dawn.
Oh, thank you, Michelle.
Okay.
So I'd muted myself. Thank you, Michelle.
Anything else to ask?
Now, I'm going to bring on Vanda in Stroud. Are you there, Vanda? You there, Vanda?
Yes, sorry, just trying to unmute myself. Just a quick one. I think there's a good socialist. Can you hear me all right?
I can, yeah.
Good socialist and lefties. We really need to push the fact that the reason we've got these lockdowns is because of government incompetence. They didn't do anything for about the first month. We had people flying in from all around the world in infected countries. There was no testing, nothing, not even temperature testing, nothing at all done. And I really think we ought to push that point. If it wasn't for that, we wouldn't have needed all these lockdowns. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vanda. I'm now going to bring in Halima, who's had a hand up for a while. Halima?
Hi everyone, can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Hi Crispin, hi all my socialist brothers and sisters, and Terry Dean. I just want to say, because I had to pray, I kind of missed a bit of the meeting. Mine is regarding the vaccination passport. I'm a carer, and I was a carer before the pandemic, but I'm now a family carer, and I'm quarantining elderly and one young child. So I'm somebody who was a sport carer, and I'm vulnerable as well. I have conditions, health conditions. I'm not trusting the vaccination, even though it's a clinical trial. And most of my family members did take the vaccination, but I'm a bit worried. And now, if you don't have the vaccination, you can't work for the NHS, you can't be a carer, you can't go, you can't travel. So it's giving me an anxiety. Obviously, we know this government, we can't trust them. They murdered 140,000 people. I just want to know, how can we move forward and how can we fight this? Because I don't agree a vaccination passport. And yes, so I hope people can understand me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we've got Paul Guest has put his hand up. Paul, are you there? Paul, are you there? I'll try again. Paul, are you there? Seeming to work with Paul. Now, I would like to go back to Heiko because I did speak to him at the start, and he did say he'd come back to some people who'd spoken. Heiko, have you got any feedback on what you've heard from people?
Yeah. One of the central arguments being made is that it's fine to have a demonstration as long as you're socially distanced and masked. Wearing a mask in the open air is likely to be increasing your risk of catching coronavirus. 75, according to YouGov's study in August last year, 75% of people who wear masks wear them incorrectly. They touch them, they fiddle with them, they wear cloth masks, they wear them for more than 20 minutes, they get damp, and therefore, if someone was to cough when they passed you and a droplet was infected with SARS-CoV-2, it would normally land on your skin and not do anything to you. But in the circumstances where you're wearing a mask in the open air, that can be then a mechanism by which you breathe that in during the next period when you're wearing the mask. So wearing a mask in the open air on a demonstration is negative as far as the transmission of coronavirus is concerned. And there's lots of evidence on that, And in France, they banned cloth masks about a month ago. As to distancing, well, distancing is about time. As I said at the very beginning, the WHO explained within 1 meter distance for 10 minutes in an enclosed space. So the most likely person to infect you is your partner or someone you live with. You are not going to be infected, or better said, the chance of being infected in the open air is almost zero. Now, as far as lockdown's concerned, well, Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, Hong Kong, none of them had a lockdown. None of them. So it's not just, Sweden or Belarus. Those countries also had no lockdown and had far fewer cases than Britain. The main reason for the cases in Britain was studied by Richard Horton, who's a leftist, I believe he's a Labour Party member probably, and he's the editor of The Lancet. And it was in the summer that he published an article with a provocative title in The Lancet called COVID-19 is not a pandemic. And in there he explained basically the decline in the provision of healthcare for non-communicable diseases, cancer, diabetes, heart disease, and other serious illnesses, is the real reason why people die, because it interacts with those diseases if they have not been adequately treated. In countries where they were adequately treated, like Germany, the death rate was far lower and within the norm.
I might have to finish on that for you, Heiki, because
Okay.
I'm getting accused of being biased.
No, that's fine. I didn't have much time actually to think about it.
I don't want that. I don't want to be branded as a whatever it is people are branded as. So I'm going to give Norman another chance, who came in after you. So Norman, are you there? Norman? I tried to be, it was all dramatic and then it didn't work because he didn't unmute. Norman's gone. Are you there, Norman?
Yes, no, I'm here. I'm here.
Oh, we've got Dr. Who again.
I've got an echo. Just a second. Hang on. Here we go. Right. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah. So what would you say to what Heiko's just said?
Sorry, the sound's gone on here. Hang on.
Oh, I see.
I'm having a technical problem.
You turned it off.
Hang on. Oh.
Don't join on my phone.
Sorry, Crispin, the sound's just gone on this thing. I don't know why.
Well, we can hear you, but you can't hear me. Is that the point?
So I could just about hear you then. So if you could say it a bit louder.
All I want to know is what's your response to what you've heard from Heiko and others who think that the anti-lockdown protests are worthwhile, and also, you know, generally, what do you think about the idea of the personal liberty thing?
Well, I think there's, on the one hand, it is absolutely dangerous and very likely that the government, and any government, will use COVID legislation against political demonstrations. That's a real danger. And they'll use it against left-wing demonstrations, they'll use it against right-wing, they'll use it against demonstrations. And we've got to resist that at all costs, because demonstrations in these days are about the only thing we've got, since we've got no other effective political opposition. But it's just very clear from what's happened with COVID over the lockdown, that to be accusing the government of using, you know, of being kind of some sort of authoritarian, totalitarian government, and it's because of, and they've made up COVID, or it's not really a fact. It's not really a fact. You just have to look at the different examples across the rest of the world. I mean, you know, are we really saying that New Zealand and other countries that have dealt with COVID effectively, are they kind of authoritarian, totalitarian governments? I mean, it's just not credible. And what we've got to do is focus on what the real problems and the real issues are, which are going to be the big social problems, the unemployment. That's going to be there's going to be a tsunami of unemployment after COVID. And we've got to do something about that, and not get distracted by thinking that really the big enemy is a government fabricating notions of COVID danger. That's not the biggest enemy. The biggest enemy is going to be unemployment and social disruption.
Okay, thank you, Norman. There are a few little bits of the survey that haven't been shown yet. Should the police allow, this is for you, Piers and Heiko, should the police allow anti-lockdown protesters to gather? Yes, 33%, no, 38%. Do you agree with lockdown restrictions? Yes, 76%, no, 13%. And do you think there's a danger of another wave? I think we've done that, maybe 85%, yes, no, 5%. So I think it's quite clear that out there's a lot of fear about another lockdown and another wave. And also there's a lot of division on this issue, because people, as I've said, would not discuss this if Piers was on the call. People said they'd not talked on the same show as him. and I've had flack for even discussing this at all. I think there's a lot of things we have in common on this call. One is that the Conservatives have mishandled this whole situation. The other thing I think that we all agree with, I've heard, is people do believe we should all protect the vulnerable and that that is a necessary thing to do. With other things about human freedom and liberty, I think people agree that we shouldn't allow restrictions on demonstrations. That's been pretty much said by everyone here. I don't think anyone said that we shouldn't have demonstrations. So there are quite a few things that everybody agrees with. I don't want to sound like some fluffy liberal who wants everyone to be friends, but I actually think that there is a lot that we can agree on. And the kind of decision from some people not to discuss this with other people and to block them on Facebook and whatever on social media and call them idiots and not idiots and just that kind of thing, it's just not gonna do anyone any good, and we're never going to get anywhere after this if we hate each other before we even get through it. And we've got to get through this thing. I personally have seen lots of people struggling. We've seen it on the shows. We've seen people are struggling with lockdown. There's no doubt that people are struggling with lockdown. Mental health is a massive problem with lockdown. I don't think we've done enough about that. We haven't resolved that. So there's no doubt why people want to stop lockdown. It isn't doing a lot of people much good. So no one can question that at all. And I really just want to say, because I kind of want to tie this up a bit, because, well, you know, a family member is on the verge of death in my family, and I'm struggling with it. I think lots of people have had situations like that, and I've managed to put this show on at very short notice, and I just want to thank everyone for taking part in the discussion, and I'll leave it there. I haven't really invited the comedians on because I didn't really have I didn't feel like having a laugh. But thank you for coming on, everyone, and I'll leave it there. Although Bob is here, maybe Bob could lead us out with the red flag.
The people's flag is deepest red. They shrouded off down Motta Day, and ere their limbs grew stiff and cold, their heart's blood dyed its every fold. So raise the scarlet standard high, beneath its shade we live and die. Though cowards flinch and traitors sneer, we keep the red flag flying here. And it waved above our infant might, when all ahead seemed dark as night. And it witnessed many a deed and vow, we shall not change its colour now. So raise the scarlet standard high, beneath its shades we live and die. Though cowards flinch and traitors sneer, we keep the red flag flying here. And it recalls our triumphs past, and gives us hope of peace at last. This banner bright, this symbol plain, of human rights and humanity's gain. So raise the scarlet standard high, beneath its shade we live and die. Though cowards flinch and traitors sneer, we keep the red flag flying here. So raise the scarlet standard high, beneath its shade